Imagine a fictional book where the characters, the heroes, have ADHD, autism, and struggle with anxiety. Well, you don't have to imagine it because my guest, speech language pathologist Carol Kauffman, wrote that book. And we are going to talk about how important it is for students who think and learn differently to see themselves in books and see themselves not just as a student being bullied, but as that person who uses their strengths, works through challenges, and saves the world.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Karen. It is so nice to see you again.
Absolutely. It is so great to be having another conversation, because you've been on the podcast before and you've been a significant contributor to the content that we have on the website because of your expertise in speech language pathology. But this is a little different. This is actually a different type of episode that we're doing today. And we usually have experts like yourself come on and discuss topics related to providing support to children and adolescents who think and learn differently, or those who struggle with mental health challenges. But this episode is going to be different because we're talking about the importance of representation of neurodiverse kids in books. And we're going to dive into your book, which does it so beautifully. But I want to start off by saying that not only, as someone who loves to read, who grew up just loving to read, I'm the kid who would spend Saturdays in my room reading.
Me too. Yeah.
And I want to start off by saying that we not only learn a great deal from books, we see ourselves in the characters, in the experiences of the characters, and seeing an accurate representation of ourselves in books is so incredibly powerful. And it can really impact self-perception. It can increase self-confidence, particularly when the hero in the stories are like us. And that is why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you wrote a book, Crystal Child, the Diamond Star Saga. It's a sci-fi book, but it's more than that. It's really a testament to grit, teamwork, and compassion. And I'd love for you to give our listeners a synopsis of the book, because you do such a beautiful job of representing neurodiverse kids in your book.
Yes. I'm glad that you said that we like to have heroes that are like us. Because when I started to write this book, of course, I went out and bought about 100 young adult or middle-aged books. And I just wanted to see what was trending, what the formats were, because it had been a while since I had been reading books like that, except for Harry Potter, which everybody read. But I noticed that what seems to be going on, which is fine, it's great. They're neurodiverse characters, mostly female. They are smart as a whip. They are cunning. They are sassy. They are strong. And I'm not going to say a bad word, but they kick butt, and
I know what you mean.
but and that's great. But I thought, I think we also need heroes who are more like us. And about, 3 million years ago, when I was 13, I remember how unsure of myself I was and a little bit shy. And this is what Crystal, the main character, is all about. And this story is told almost all in Crystal's head. So we know what she's thinking. We know what she's feeling. And this young girl has been diagnosed with ADD. ADHD inattentive type, if you want to get technical about it. She also has an anxiety disorder. So she's not really like the other characters that I was reading in the other books. She is not sassy. She doesn't think she's smart, although she is. But in this book, she has been named in a mysterious prophecy, they don't even know where they found it, as the only one in the universe who can save humanity from this coming catastrophe. And let me just backstory this a little if I can.
Yes, please. I'm already intrigued.
Oh yeah, 600 pages down to boop. It's January 2027, so just near future. Crystal lives in a small town in Montana with her beloved father and her twin brother, Tad, who has been diagnosed with autism. So they both have challenges. They're both in middle school. And as you can probably figure out, they are relentlessly bullied, especially by one super bully in the school. But these challenges have brought them closer. And Crystal just absolutely adores her brother. She looks out for him. He looks out for her. And they're just fiercely protective of each other. And Tad is rarely out of Crystal's sight and vice versa. Until one day, and they call it the day of the big snowfall, when all kinds of weird, strange things happen. And I can't go into all of them. But first of all, their father, who has been 100% stable, loving, practical dad, suddenly goes berserk and starts shooting a gun into the trees in the forest behind their house. And he ends up in jail. And Crystal turns around. She doesn't know what to do. And she realizes her brother has totally vanished into thin air. And since Crystal's the only one left and they don't have any relatives, the police show up. They take her to Children's Services. They put her in custody. And to her utter horror, she is placed with her science teacher, who's been acting so creepy toward her lately that she's terrified. And here she ends up, living with him and his wife as a foster child. Well, she tries to escape, but nothing's working. Luckily, and I put that in air quotes, her father shows up. He has somehow escaped from jail, still has his jail suit on, breaks down the door, and he rescues Crystal, and they just take off. They elude the police. They drive and drive and drive through the night, through all the mountains of Idaho, and suddenly the car comes to a stop. She's a little bit creeped out because her father hasn't said a word to her, but she is so happy that he's rescued her that she knows that he'll finally give her an explanation about what's been going on. But instead of that, when they stop, she turns and her father starts to morph into the most hideous, awful, scary, inhuman, robotic beast that she's could ever imagine. And one of his claws is reaching toward her neck. Well, it's probably would be a nanosecond before he reaches her neck, and suddenly she's somewhere else. And she finds she's in a world that is so bizarre that she knows she's got to be dreaming. This cannot be real. But slowly she learns the truth. She meets a group of brilliant scientists who fled. Actually, they were in northern Finland. They were a group of scientists who were working secretly and diligently to heal the earth. And this group of robotic, horrible, sociopathic beings came and slaughtered about 200 of their members. And so this group of 12, the only survivors, fled. They had already learned how to teleport. And so they teleported to the star, and Crystal finds out she has been teleported as well. So she's also told that she's been named in this prophecy. They don't know what it's all about. She doesn't know what it's all about, but it's totally insane. First of all, she's only 13 and she knows nothing about quantum physics or how to help robots. And the prophecy says that she will find a way for the robots to start evolving into human hybrids. Well, that's ridiculous. And the other thing, she's got ADD, anxiety, and now because of all the trauma she's recently had, she's been diagnosed with PTSD. So she's got all these things going on. And the more she tries to think, what am I going to do? The more her brain shuts down. This is very common with people with anxiety, ADD, depression, those kinds of things. And she thinks, it's almost as if she were the butt of some huge, colossal, cosmic joke. And she's, as I said, just terrified. The solution is totally out of her grasp. And in fact, the scientists who are trying to help her, they don't know what to do either. So they're all in a quandary. Looks like everything is doomed. And this, finally, toward the end of the book, we start to see some things.
Right. And I don't want you to give too...
I am not, that's where I stop. I'm not going to give the ending. It's just a tiny slice of this saga. And there's so many more fascinating twists and turns. One of my editorial consultants, she said, Carol, I can usually figure out endings, but she said, yours had me guessing until the end. And I said, good. So, but
that's all the signs of a great book.
That's the 600-page synopsis into, two paragraphs, but it's a fun read. But, and I started out just making a fun, how you Google things and you end up on a link, then you end up on another link, and all of a sudden you're reading about things that you had no idea that you wanted to read about. I came to an article, I don't know even how I got there, and I think it was in an online forum or a magazine called Futurism, and they said that scientists had discovered a gigantic burnt out star, and it was carbon, and we know that carbon essentially is diamond. So they said, essentially, we've got this gigantic, I think they said 10 billion, trillion carats of a diamond up in outer space. And I just thought, oh, cool. This would make a good story for kids. But as I started writing it, I realized that the work that I'd done in the last 40 years as a speech pathologist working with mental health professionals and educational medical professionals, all these characters were creeping into my story that had these challenges. And so my book became another mission of mine. And what I wanted was, and my pipe dream is that this book will be read by young people who may have challenges like this, because they can read exactly how Crystal's feeling, what she's thinking. Her father has taught her techniques, say, for handling bullies, for handling her anxiety and her ADD, and she uses them in the book as situations arise. Some of them work, some of them don't. And then when she is diagnosed with PTSD by one of the scientists on the Diamond Star, she's a neuropsychologist, and she works with her to help her with deal with that trauma. So I'm hoping that the children that read it will kind of get an idea of, oh, there's hope. There are things that I can do to help myself. And in fact, I write a letter to my readers at the end of the book. And I think I have just a quote. Yeah, I say, like Crystal, you have gifts. You are valuable. You can be a visionary too. It doesn't matter how old you are, where you live, your race, your culture, your emotional challenges, or your learning challenges, we're all united in a quest to make Earth a better place for all of us. So I'm hoping not only to inspire them, but to kind of give them a purpose. I've seen a lot of children or young people who are floundering these days, and some of them are giving up, or they're just torn in a million different directions. Well, we all have the same mission. We all want our children, our grandchildren to grow up in a world that's safe, that's healthy, that's peaceful. And no matter who you are, you can contribute. So that's my message to my readers. I also have a discussion guide and a resource guide. So my pipe dream is that teachers will maybe use this in the classroom, and it will help a lot of these children. That's I don't know, in an ideal world, that's what would happen is, and I would even give out the book for free, just so that these kids who are wondering, like I did when I was that age, who am I? What do I do about bullies and all those questions? Crystal does a good job.
Yes. And I think what's intriguing is that you wrote it from a place of empathy and also a place of experience, because you are a speech language pathologist. And like you said, you have over 40 years of experience working with children with challenges related to ADHD, to autism, to anxiety, communication disorders, trauma. And I just think, like I said at the beginning, it's so important to have books with representation. It's important to have books with diverse heroes. And this may be heroes from underrepresented groups, BIPOC heroes, but we also need heroes from the neurodiverse community, which is why I think that your characters, your heroes, are so important. And I think that will resonate with many individuals, like you were saying, who think and learn differently. And one of the things that comes through for me from what it is that you're saying and how you've described your characters, and you say this when in your description of your book, is that students who experience struggles can see that aspects of their disabilities may actually be their greatest superpowers, and that they can lean into that. And I love that is something that is central to the story.
Yes. And the other thing that I thought I would do, since there's so much nastiness and negativity in the world today, I thought I would give my young readers just a model. This scientific community, they call it the quantum community, is comprised of people with impeccable integrity and compassion and respect for every living creature, as well as Mother Earth herself. And the reader can go along and just kind of watch as they interact. And they do have almost insurmountable problems. There are arguments. They don't agree on things, but they're always respectful to each other. And being a speech language pathologist, I give a few little models of the power of communication that can make or break a relationship and how important that is. I also threw a little bit of humor in there. There are a couple of robots who are empathetic. They've been, say, injected with human DNA, and they're starting to evolve. And one in particular is a main character, and he is a hybrid of a human and the robot. So he's got all this these analytical skills that AIs have, but his empathy is growing by leaps and bounds. But his language, he has a lot of trouble with language. For instance, his human counterpart says, "Oh, no, wait a minute, scratch that." And he said, "Not yet programmed for itch. cannot scratch. He takes everything literally because he hasn't learned idioms. He hasn't learned figurative language yet. So that's kind of a humorous part, a comic relief in the book. So I have a lot of fun with that. But yeah, all through the book, there are models of just how to solve problems, how to work with people, teamwork. Since this group is from Finland, they have a word called sisu, which is not really translatable. The closest word we have here in English is grit. And I remember reading a couple of years ago that they found that grit is one of the correlated most closely with success with children with ADD. If they, have that stick-to-itiveness, and no matter how hard it is, you keep trying and you keep going. And if you're knocked down, you just dust yourself off and get up and get going again. And they talk about this sisu, aka grit, all the way through the book. And that's another thing that I wanted to drive home with my readers, that no matter how bad things seem, you can dust yourself off, you can get back up, and you can reinvent yourself. And so that was another. Oh my gosh, there's so many. my mind is going ADD with all this stuff. But I think if enough children, could just read this, or even if just one child, it's kind of like the starfish parable, and all these starfish are on the sand, the beach, and the man comes along, this kid's throwing starfish into the ocean. He says, "You'll never be able to throw all those starfish in the ocean." He said, "Well, it makes a difference to this one." And so, but hopefully, I will be able to help young people who are struggling with these issues.
And it's not only something that will resonate with students, with adults who have these neurodiverse profiles, but also for those who do not have ADHD, who do not have autism, anxiety, or PTSD. It allows them to see the world through the eyes of someone else, which I think is so important as well.
And hopefully, they'll come away with more empathy and compassion. One of the things that character's parents taught him, they said, with brilliance must come compassion. There are a lot of brilliant people in the world, but unless you have compassion, you're not going to get very far, because things are just going to fall apart. So again, this group is a model. And at the end, I'm trying to think of how to get this across without giving away the ending totally. But
no, don't give away anything.
But the neatest thing that came to me, and I've read before that authors say the book just wrote itself. The characters came to me and they told me what to write, and I would think to myself, yeah, right. But now I know what they were talking about, and I didn't know what the ending was going to be, but they kind of just, guided me through, and what actually saved the world. And okay, Crystal does end up saving the world. You know that. We're not going to send her into some abyss somewhere. But the interesting thing is how children or young people or even adults who are differently abled can put their learning styles together, teamwork, and only by doing that can a goal be met. So I'm going to leave it there, because it's kind of a neat ending, if I may say so myself. So, but yeah, Crystal is actually the one that saves the universe, but in a roundabout way. So, and she needs other people with different learning styles to help her out.
What is the appropriate age for this book, Carol? Is it for tweens, for teens, adults? Who's it written for?
Yeah, when I first started writing this story, Crystal can be nothing but, she's 5 days away from her 13th birthday. And then I started reading books about how to read books or how to write books. And it said, okay, if you're going to write for middle agers, you're going to have the protagonist be 13 or 14. And if you're going to write a young adult novel, the protagonist has to be 16 or 17. The book has to be, if it's for middle graders, no more than 200 pages long. So I was breaking all these rules. And I told my my consultant, my favorite one, and she said, Carol, just write the story. And she said, J.K. Rowling, not that I want to bring her up or compare myself to her in any way, shape, or form. She said she just wrote the story and she broke quite a few rules. And, she did pretty well. So she said, just write the story. And if it's a good one, then the book will sell and people will be interested in it. People don't care about rules. And so, but technically, I would say maybe a sophisticated 9-year-old up to, I would say adults. I have quite a few of my friends and relatives were reading my manuscript and they would write and say, where's the next chapter? Where's the next chapter? I've got to get the next chapter. So it's, and I would love to see parents sitting down with their 9-year-olds and above reading the book together, because there's so much to discuss and there are angles and questions that the child might have that the adult can research with the child together, and also with teachers, I'm hoping, or with therapists. They can read the book together, because there are not only real things that they can research, like the planet Earth, planet Cancri, and the Diamond Star are all actually real things. And they can do some, if the child is interested in science, for instance, they can research that. There are ways to deal with bullies. I read an article a long time ago by Nancy McKinley in Braving the Bullies about talking tools that kids can stick into their pockets and then pull them out metaphorically and use them. For instance, when Crystal is confronted by the bully, she says, okay, talking tool that her therapist has taught her. I'm just going to ignore him. And I said, not today, Jackson. And he kept hounding her. He said, oh, are you an awfully dumb ditz? Is that what ADD stands for? And she just pushed him out of the way. And then he said, oh, are you awfully deaf ditz too? And she said, she used another talking tool, the agreement talking tool, where she says, yeah, I think I am. And she left it at that. And then he kept bothering her. And finally, she pulled out her neural ninja distraction trick. And she screamed and said, there's a stink bug on your backpack. Oh my God, it's big. And that did it. And he dropped his backpack and totally forgot about her. So, I use as examples actually techniques that have been in the literature that we've taught children to use. And it's kind of in a fun way too. So all through the book, there are things. And I can just envision a young person saying, talking tools? What other talking tools could I use maybe with a bully? And then they can discuss that maybe. Crystal also is besieged with anxiety, and she talks about her counselor teaching her about grounding techniques. So right before she goes in to talk to a new tutor, she's so nervous, and she looks around. Okay, 5 smells. I smell the lemon pledge on the wax floor. I smell the gas from the buses outside. I smell, and what do I see? I see the bulletin board. I see the chalk. I see this. I see that. But she's actually using techniques that they teach children who have anxiety disorders. And she puts them into practice so that the readers can see exactly how that would look in real life. So the whole book is just peppered with all these types of techniques and her feelings and what works and what doesn't in the midst of a very interesting plot.
It feels like there's a lot to learn and a lot to experience when reading this book. And again, I think that it is so important to have the representation of students, children with ADHD, with experience anxiety, with autism in the book. And I, for one, am looking forward to jumping into the story of Crystal and Tad and sharing it with my 10-year-old daughter who, like I said at the beginning, is a voracious reader who loves science fiction. I think she's finishing up the Wings of Fire series right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to thank you so much for being here, for writing this book, and for all that you do to support students who think and learn differently. I really appreciate you.
Well, Karen, I so appreciate you. I remember when you were just getting your website up and running, and I thought, this is so perfect because I had that in the back of my mind, but I am too ADD to do all this technical stuff to put a website together. So I thought, oh, good, Karen's going to do this and it's going to be great. So it's been wonderful working with you.
Thank you so much, Carol. And I'm sure that you will be back. First, one more question. Will there be a sequel to this book?
Yeah, I did a podcast on Tuesday and I kind of like, will there be a sequel? I am hoping there will be a sequel. I have the first couple chapters already because there are questions that need to be answered in the first book.
Right.
So
we will leave it at that. We will not give anything else away, but thank you so much. Again, I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time. And again, love all that you are doing. Thank you.
And I love all that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I have put a link to where you can find Carol's book in the show notes, so be sure to check it out. And she has not shared a lot about this book. There are a lot of twists and turns, so make sure you pick it up and then get back to me and let me know what you think. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.